Has any coach done more to change the perception of their program than Kevin Young with the BYU men's basketball program? I would argue not even Lavelle Edwards has done as much as he has done in such a short time. We're talking about it on today's show.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, your resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you who we like to call everydayers right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. This is your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars, and today's show is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business, my friends. That's why LinkedIn Jobs help you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. All right, let's dive right in on today's show. And you probably have heard / seen, and if you haven't, you've been under a rock, it feels like. But the Kanon catching signing with BYU is officially official. He gives BYU potentially their second one-and-done prospect to this year's basketball program. He and Egor Demin are expected to be guys that are taken in the first round of the NBA draft by most projections next year. Now, the bigger point to be made here is what an incredible job that Kevin Young has done in his short tenure as BYU basketball's head coach. He has guys like Adrian Wojnarowski, yesterday Jonathan Givony, who is the lead NBA draft analyst, probably on the plan. He obviously works for ESPN and does a really, really good job there. He was the one that initially broke the news officially of Kanon Catchings committing and signing with BYU. He's got guys like Aaron Torres out there. We've got guys like Fran Fraschilla, just the who's who of the college basketball world are talking about good old Brigham Young University, and they're talking about the BYU basketball program. It is absolutely insane, incredible, insert whatever adjective or superlative you want there to consider what Kevin Young has accomplished with the BYU basketball program. And frankly, it's awesome. I am absolutely having the time of my life covering BYU basketball. And it's unlike I've done this podcast coming up in August to be our 6-year anniversary. So we're well on our way we're over half a decade into this. And I can say unequivocally, I have never had a better time covering BYU basketball. It's just absolutely insane the levels that Kevin Young has risen this program to. You add Kanon Catchings, a top 40 prospect, a guy who figures to play the 3 or the 4 spot for your team, very likely could tandem with a guy like Egor Demin on the perimeter for BYU and make them an absolute force in the Big 12 this coming season. And it's just incredible to consider all the different things that have come together in 2 months and change since Kevin Young was hired as BYU men's basketball coach. I argued in the open of today's show that no coach has done more in such a short time to change the perception of the program, not even Lavelle Edwards. I would frankly say Lavelle Edwards, he didn't really change the perception till 2 or 3 seasons at least into his tenure as BYU football's head coach. Yes, they had a winning season his first year. They had their only losing season on him the second year. And really until you got Gary Scheide there and started an incredible run of quarterbacks, the so-called quarterback factory or QBU that BYU had throughout the 1970s and most of the 1980s, leading up to Ty Detmer's Heisman Trophy win in 1990. That really took some time to get going. Kevin Young has elevated BYU basketball from a plucky program a lot of people thought would be a decent team if Mark Pope would have stuck around for year 2 of the Big 12 and probably would have had to reload a little bit, but see what they're capable of. And has now taken them where I'm hearing from people that are much more connected than I am in the college basketball universe about BYU being a dark horse Big 12 champion next year. That is the levels that Kevin Young has risen this BYU basketball program to. It is absolutely insane to watch it unfolding. But at the same time, as I said, it is awesome to see. But it makes covering the team so fun. Now, we're talking about a lot of stuff on paper. We're talking about top 40 prospects, guys that are being rated by 24/7 Sports, On3, ESPN, and the like. but the talent base for this BYU basketball program is insanely deep. It was very, very deep. It felt like with last year's squad, when we all kind of looked at the totality of how things went year one in the Big 12. This year, it feels like coming up, BYU could be that much deeper, that much better, and that much more talented. Therefore, that's why, like I said, people that are far more in the know on the college basketball universe are whispering a little bit about BYU basketball being a dark horse. It is an absolutely awesome thing to be tracking when it comes to BYU basketball. I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about sometimes on this podcast, and this time of year, we're in the back half of June. Typically, this is one of the slowest, absolutely slowest times of the year for BYU sports information, BYU sports news, as it were, content for me to talk about on this podcast. Kevin Young, KYU, continues to deliver in droves every single day. It just seems like there's another piece out there. Kanon catching just the latest in a long run of stellar news for BYU hoops. And it's really been a fun thing to do. And the bigger point I want to talk about is that Kevin Young, he has got what I would consider to be an elite skill as a coach. Now, it's not his only elite skill, because this is a man, remember, who was highly coveted, highly paid in the NBA universe. He was the highest paid assistant coach in the NBA. You don't get that just simply because somebody feels generous and is giving you that money. It comes on merit. It comes on reputation. It comes on what people believe and understand you are capable of. It is something he's bringing to BYU, and I had a conversation with an individual. If I were to reveal who it was, you'd be very understanding of why I want to talk about what they had to say about Kevin Young and his incredible acumen as a coach. And we'll delve into that next as we continue on right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn. When you're hiring for small business, you want to find quality professionals, who are right for the role. That's why you guys need to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs is the tools to help you find the right professionals, and the best part is for your team, and they do it faster and for free. LinkedIn is not just a job board, everybody. It is helping you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else. Even those who aren't actively searching for a new job might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70%, you heard that, 70%, 70, of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place, simply put. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours of their job posting. Hire professionals like a professional and do it on LinkedIn. They know small businesses are wearing many hats and might not have the adequate time or resources to hire, so they're trying to make it as simple as possible. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for their hiring. Why don't you guys? Post your job for free today at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Of course, terms and conditions apply. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you for being with us. Are you guys sick of watching ESPN or Fox Sports and hearing all the talking heads seemingly screaming at one another, and you have to turn on that volume to feel like you can even make it through the day? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It is a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every single day to bring you the biggest stories like the other networks, but without all the screaming going on elsewhere. Locked On Sports today, bringing you canvas analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right. Had a conversation with an individual yesterday who is very engrossed with BYU basketball, and we were going back and forth on what Kevin Young has accomplished so far as BYU's head coach. And the point that they made to me is something I think that maybe some of you have considered this. I hadn't really necessarily considered it, but there have been a couple of you, and I'm not going to out anybody, who have said that Kevin Young seems really dry, Jake. Is he as dry as he seems to be in the media appearances and the sessions that he's done with the media? He's a pretty cut and dry guy. There's no doubt about that. He is not the I don't know the bombastic type coach who's going to go out there and pontificate on everything and make everything the biggest deal it is. He's kind of the anti-Mark Pope, and it's nothing against Mark Pope. That's the way that Mark Pope operates. And as I got to know Mark Pope fairly well during his run at BYU, even going back to his days at UVU after becoming a head coach. And that's just the way that Mark Pope prefers to operate. He likes to be out in the spotlight. He likes to, like I said, pontificate on things and really blow things up. The biggest thing with Kevin Young is I think that he is more in the mold of most NBA coaches. And what that is, and this is the point that the individual I talked to made to me, is that in the NBA world, who are the real key players, key figures on an NBA team? It's not the coach. It's the players. They are, and they use the term alphas. They are the alphas of their teams. They are the most important ingredient in all of it. If you don't have the quote unquote Jimmies and the Joes in basketball, you're simply put not going to win. I am a guy who I have worked around the Utah Jazz on a professional basis for 15 years now. I have been a lifelong fan of that team, and they had the Jimmies and the Joes in the 1990s on their way to 2 back-to-back NBA title runs with John Stockton and Karl Malone. What Ryan Smith and the Utah Jazz are trying to endeavor to do right now is to rebuild this franchise to where it's a sustainable product of that ilk. Will that ultimately come to fruition? Time will tell. But the bigger point is, in the NBA, the players, yes, the players are the biggest deal. In college basketball, let's be honest, a lot of times it's the coach. Remember, we have a sport out there in college basketball that in many respects, a lot of the coaches are the biggest name at their programs. And it's nothing against the likes of Bill Self. It's nothing against guys like Rick Pitino. It's nothing against those high-level coaches, but they have a larger-than-life perception or persona, and that dominates the headlines. Their players, in many respects, are secondary to what their head coach is doing. This individual pointed out to me that Kevin Young has come up through the NBA ranks, and he understands that in the NBA and even in basketball in general, that he thinks is going to make the difference for Kevin Young is to have a guy like Kevin Young who understands it's more about the guys on the court. He is there, speaking of Kevin Young, to guide them, to teach them, to mold them into the unit he wants them to be, but he wants to let them be the star. That is in stark contrast, as I mentioned, to a lot of college basketball entities out there. And it's nothing against those other coaches. They're a product of what they are. That's not a bad thing. But Kevin Young understands that the players are going to make the difference from him. They're going to make or break his tenure as BYU's head coach. And this individual pointed out that is going to be probably, in their opinion, his chief strength as BYU's coach and just a coach at the college level. He's kind of the antithesis, once again, of many of coaches out there. Even he's, like I said, he's the antithesis of Mark Pope. And Mark Pope did a lot of good things at BYU, but Kevin Young, I think, understands that what he wants to accomplish is going to have to come by way of the players actually making shots, rebounding, playing defense, getting out on the break, doing all the things on the court that bring the headlines to your program. I talked a little bit ago that Kevin Young has done more to elevate his program than any other figure in BYU sports history, quite frankly. And the crazy thing about it is I think he'd be very, very quick to defer to his assistant coaches, to administrators at BYU, and obviously laying the praise at the feet of his players for trusting him and believing in what he is trying to build at BYU. And once again, it's just kind of that it's the anti-traditional college basketball coach. And that is going to be something that I think Kevin Young is going to utilize. He is going to make it about the players. He wants them to go out and live their dreams. I think he would rather see nothing more than guys like Egor, Demin, a guy like Kanon Catchings, obviously live their dreams and going to the NBA draft as soon as next year, after being a one and done in 2025. He'd like to be sitting there in the green room in Brooklyn, the Barclays Center, when they have the NBA draft during the first round and be loving up his guys as they hear their names called by whatever team drafts them. He wants nothing more than that for his players. But the other thing about it, I think he understands there's other guys that their pathways may be going overseas where they're not going to hear their name taken in the NBA draft. But once again, it's about the players for KYU. That is a very, very admirable trait. And once again, if the person who passed this information to me and told me about it and kind of laid out why they believe it's a difference, you'd understand exactly why I'm talking about, because this person knows of what they talk about. They have been in all of these circles when it comes to professional as well as college basketball. And it's a really, really cool thing to watch as it unfolds here for BYU. Ultimately, the success and failure of Kevin Young's tenure for BYU, we talk about this. I talk about this all the time on the podcast. It all comes down to your team, in this case, BYU, at the end of any game, having more points than the other team. It's wins and losses. Yes, there's a lot of stories that go on around all of that engender confidence and make people become a fan of the program or a fan of a coach and how they operate, and make people think, okay, this person's got the it factor. But more important than anything else, once again, is the wins and losses. If BYU goes out and has a 500 season in Kevin Young's first season in charge of the BYU basketball program, is anybody going to be talking about the incredible first 2 months that he has enjoyed coming up? If like I said, it's 500 at the end of March next year, absolutely not. There's going to be a lot of opining about what did we miss here? What happened? Why did this get off to such a rocky start for Kevin Young? I don't believe that's going to happen, because I think just simply put, the talent level that Kevin Young has assembled is absolutely insane. It's as high level as I feel like you probably can get. And the best part is he's got time to add another piece. He could go out there and add. I'm on the staunch. You need a 7-footer just for 7-footer's sake. I'm going to be a broken record in saying that, but he has another scholarship and roster slot to work with here. What can he still accomplish to add yet another potential talented player to BYU's roster? I'm not counting anything out when it comes to what Kevin Young can accomplish in this period right now as he assembles his first roster. But at the end of the day, the bigger point is coming up beginning in early November, we're all going to really look at this and say, okay, the real success, it's all about those W's versus the L's at the end of the day. And that will ultimately, like I said, determine the success or failure in people's minds of what Kevin Young is doing. But he is absolutely on the right track. And people that I talk to, they cannot say enough good things about this guy. And they've made people that were very high on what Mark Pope accomplished. But once again, Kevin Young, he's just kind of taking what Mark Pope did and has just elevated it 2 or 3 notches higher than really any of us. I think any of us could have expected for the BYU basketball program. It's truly incredible to consider what he has accomplished and what he still could accomplish given the adequate time and obviously the resources that apparently are available from BYU as well. All right, we will finish up today's show with a football note. Interesting note from one of the leading college football recruiting gurus out there about a guy that's visiting BYU this very week on an official visit. Could BYU be adding another top tier, very talented wide receiver to an already talented wide receiving core? We'll talk about it as we roll on right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, and more. And, of course, you can bet on all of it with our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Whether you want to bet on baseball, the NBA Finals just got over, but if you want Stanley Cup Finals, if you think that the Edmonton Oilers can pull it off, they've ground out 2 wins. Absolutely incredible stuff, by the way. If you want to put money on Connor McDavid winning the Conn Smythe Trophy, even if the Florida Panthers still win the Stanley Cup, you can get in on all of that with our friends at FanDuel. And the best part is with a $5 bet, you can cash in $200 extra to be used on everything from MVP for the Conn Smythe Trophy, MVP for Major League Baseball, upcoming games in Major League Baseball, whoever's going to hit one out of the park in whichever game you're watching. Whatever you want to do, you can do it with our friends at FanDuel. And the best part is you can do it on an app that's super easy and simple to use. So visit FanDuel.com/locked on and add a big win to your summer bucket list. That's FanDuel.com/locked on to get started today. It's all courtesy of your friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you've not done so already, please sign up for our Locked On Cougars Insider Group. It's a really fun way to interact with the show. I'm sending out updates the second I'm seeing news come out. Some of you might not be on social media when news is breaking. So the best part about what we're doing with the Locked On Cougars Insider Group is it literally sends a text message to you. All of us are attached to our mobile devices. Let's be honest. We're all, and to some level, it feels like addicted to them. I freely admit I have got a crippling addiction to my cell phone, and I probably need to curb that. But You can get updates literally in the form of a text message. You can fire back with your thoughts as well. Click the link in the show notes below. 14-day free trial, $5 a month afterwards. Supports the show financially. Also gets you guys on the inside scoop of everything I'm hearing around BYU sports. So join us today on our Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right. One note before we go on today's show on the football front. Obviously, BYU, as I have been told, there are 18 official visits happening this week. A number of guys already committed, the likes of Blake Bryce, Tyler Payne, etc., who've already committed to BYU, making an official visit. There are a lot of other guys, like I said, of 18 visits. There are 4 happening earlier this week. I was told of 14 coming up this weekend of varying levels of guys that BYU's trying to bring into this football program. But one that I am super excited for, because I think his film makes him just excites me to watch what he does on the field, is Lamason Waller. Now, he, according to 24/7 Sports, is on the verge of a 4-star prospect. He's an 88 rating from 24/7 Sports, right on the cusp of being a 3-star prospect, but bordering on 4-star. The overall composite ratings that 24/7 Sports puts together, and the difference is they compile all the other ratings from the other websites, On3, ESPN, etc. They actually have him as a composite 4-star. And according to Greg Biggins from 24/7 Sports, he has put a crystal ball in for BYU. Lamason Waller would be a really, really nice pickup. And somebody pointed out to me, talking about Lamason Waller, is that he has connections to Noah Lugo. Now, Noah Lugo signed with BYU last year out of Texas as a quarterback. He is looking to work his way up the depth chart this season, in hopes that a year or two down the line, he might be the guy for BYU. Well, he and Lamason Waller were youth football teammates. And we talked not that long ago about Nolan Keeney, the most recent quarterback commit for BYU, he being a former youth teammate of a tight end stud, Brock Harris, out there. These connections, they go back literally years. And the other thing is, and I learned this after some of you pointed out, that Lamason Waller pointed out he also has connections to Tim McTire, the former BYU cornerback himself, who's been doing a lot of coaching in Southern California. So Waller's got connections to BYU via current and former players, and that is got me intrigued that BYU could be adding another composite 4-star talent at wide receiver. Fesi Sitake is an incredibly effective recruiter. There's absolutely no doubt about it. He is on the short list of best recruiters on BYU's football staff. And if he can add Lamason Waller, add that to JoJo Phillips, add that to Cody Epps, add the number of bodies at wide receiver that BYU has added. Darius Lassiter is a transfer. Keelan Marion is a transfer. Chase Roberts was a 4-star prospect coming out of high school himself before his mission. The talent base that BYU has compiled at wide receiver, if they get any level, it feels like, of steady quarterback play, that wide receiving core should produce in droves. That is what I'm excited about. And to add a guy the caliber of Lamason Waller potentially to that excites me all the more. Now, guys like Darius Lassiter, they only got 1 year left here. So obviously they got to get it right in terms of his opportunity to go out there and get to the NFL. But that opens up a spot next year, ostensibly, for Lamason Waller to step in and get on the depth chart for BYU. It is really, really cool to see BYU football working their way against feels like an onslaught of BYU basketball news, but still doing some good things on the recruiting front. I said this earlier this week, is that BYU football is not sitting and standing idly by looking at BYU basketball saying, well, why can't we do that? They're working their thing as well. It's a little different. The apples to oranges comparison in basketball and football recruiting is absolutely true. It's 13 guys versus 85 plus walk-ons. You have a 123-man roster in college football. You have 17, if I'm not mistaken, with all walk-ons in basketball. The numbers just pale in comparison. So obviously it's really a numbers game. But BYU football is not, like I said, just walking over there. Well, why can't we accomplish with BYU basketball? They're doing their thing. Adding a composite 4-star talent like Lamason Waller would go a long way, I think, to calming some of the fears that BYU football is kind of failing where BYU basketball is thriving. Once again, I don't feel like they're comparable in many respects, because the money, the whole situation now is the NIL is involved. The lure of the transfer portal is always out there when it comes to these athletes, and trying to stock essentially a wide receiver room on a college football team is as big as any Division I Power 4 college basketball team in reality. BYU's wide receiving core, I'd name 8 guys right now who I think will see time, and pretty good time this year, for the BYU Cougars. That's more than half of a basketball roster, and there are a bunch more bodies in that room looking to prove they can play. Remember, it was not too long ago that BYU's quarterback room was stuffed to the gills with as many as 10 guys in spring camp. Now, that has been whittled down due to guys being told that, hey, you need to switch positions. You may want to look at the transfer portal, etc. But it's really cool to see a guy like Lamason Waller being crystal balled to BYU. It indicates that Fesi Sitake is still getting after on the recruiting front. Him being from Southern California, I guarantee that Aaron Roderick, who's got a lot of responsibilities down in that neck of the woods, has done a lot of good work in also trying to sell Waller on what BYU can do for him. And once again, adding another 4-star wide receiver to the mix, it's never a bad thing if you're Kalani Sitake and the BYU Cougars. All right, so there you go. That's what I got for you guys on this Wednesday edition of the show. A big thank you once again to all of you for your support of the podcast. Cannot thank you guys enough for continuing to roll with us throughout the summer. Our numbers have never been stronger in terms of our downloads, our views, and the like, and it's all credit to all y'all for checking us out. So until tomorrow, everybody, thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Thank you once again to all of you who are everydayers as well, and we'll talk to you guys next time right here on Locked On Cougars.